You know what? As I sat down, I was preparing for this. I thought, I've never done this with this group, but before we even start, does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts or something that has been sticking with you that maybe you wanted to share? Another way of wording it would be, what has stuck out most to you in anything that we've talked about over the past, geez Louise, I don't even know anymore, 8-9 weeks. It's been a long time. Is there anything what has stuck out most to you during that time? And you can get the ball rolling if you want, Annie. I know Sean's sitting on his hands right now. He's ready to talk.
I do have something to say, actually. Yeah, one thing that I've carried through each week as we've learned more is kind of that somatic response and how it's so interrelated to that mental and emotional state. And so one thing that I've kind of been carrying from week to week is just being more present with the people that I'm around, my family, and what they're doing with their hands and where they're placing their hands on their body, and just kind of being more in tune to that, and how it's a way for them to, respond mentally and emotionally, just physically, just that physical aspect about it.
Have you noticed something? I mean, anything different? Are they doing things that you thought, wow, I never noticed that before?
I notice, yeah, I do. With my son, a lot of times he'll put his hands around his chest, especially if he's overly anxious and things like that. So I won't mimic him, but when I'm sitting with him, I'll make sure to place my hand on his chest or on his upper back, just kind of like a reassurance that hey, we're okay, we're safe, even if there's no anxiety or stress in the situation, but just as a kind of somatic reassurance that, hey, Daddy's here for you, kind of thing.
Right. Oh, that's cool. Anybody else? What has stuck out most to you, Annie?
What I can tell you that I use the most often is the zebra. That's probably, what's that?
The shaking it off, or
the shaking it off. In fact, I was with somebody day before yesterday, and they were really stressed out about somebody being on the road because of the blizzard, right? And this individual was in the midst of the blizzard, and they're young and they're traveling, and finally got word that they got home, and you could just see all that angst, that anxiety just still hanging on this individual. And I had shared the story of the zebra with them. So I had them get up and just shake their hands, shake their legs, shake their body, and counted backwards from 45 and had them shake. And at the end of it, to take those deep breaths and do some sun salutations and move it around and drink a glass of water. And you could see the visual change, in doing that. And I've used it in my healing group on Fridays. I have a talking circle with a bunch of women, reentry women. So I deeply appreciate that. I also deeply appreciate, I'm somebody that uses humor when I teach. So I have a deep appreciation for your humor and your way of taking very complex, very challenging understandings and making it, one, relevant, but two, edible, right? So you deliver it out in bite-sized edible bits that you can take in and consume, and then there's a story to go with it, so that brings it further within our psyche, and there's humor to go with it, so it opens us up to it.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say. I love teaching this stuff. I'm very passionate about it. And
It's evident.
and it's important to me that we're just not having nice talks every Tuesday. It's important that the information is palatable and that's something they can take home and use. Anybody else have anything that you wanted to that stuck out most to you, or maybe something you've tried with with yourself, with your honey, with your kids, anything like that? I might change what I'm going to talk about today, because it's a smaller group. So I think I'm gonna change it a little bit. So I'll do this. Hold on. Because it's a smaller group and there's something to be said for that, and said for there's a lot going on there, and the weather's bad, and there's something about this is so important to me, even though all this is going on in the community. I want to do this, and so this group is a select group of a select group. I mean, other people have other things going on, but I wanted to dive into something else today that is a very specific tool that I wanted to introduce to you. And I was going to do it later, but then I just, you know how the spirit moves. So I'm just compelled to do it right now. So I'm going to go with my compulsion. Is that what? I go with my compellage. When I was probably about 13 years ago, I was up in Sitka, Alaska, speaking in the community, and I was in a room, and there's probably, I don't know, 50 people in the room, and I talk just how I talk. And this is pretty much me. This is what you get. This is who I am. Like if we went and sat at dinner, or you came to my house, this is probably how we're going to talk. We're just going to shoot the breeze and giggle, and so I was doing a presentation like that up in Sitka, and there was a gentleman sitting over here. What is that? About 10 o'clock, right here, about halfway back. And he, every time he smiled, his teeth were so white. He smiled, and I would like zone in on his teeth. My ADHD would kick in, and I almost lost my train. Every time I smiled, I'd lose my train of thought. I was like, I would do that. And his teeth were super white. And he's a native guy. It looked like he had some tough times in his life. It looked like he had his nose broken at it and things at that point in his life. And he had some scars and things on his face. But he smiled and lit up the room. And afterward, he came up and talked with me. And he said, "Darryl," and I said, "Yeah," and he shook hands. And every time he talked, his teeth would fall out. And so he talked like that. And he'd say, "Well, Darryl, I wanted to tell you a story." And ADHD, I was like on his teeth. The world disappeared to me except for his teeth. And I was watching. And finally, I pulled myself out of that tailspin. And he told me this story that I'll share with you guys. The hard story, but I think it really sets up what I need to set up today. That he was at a conference in Sacramento, like 10 years previous. It was like in the 90s. And Sacramento, he said he was out for a walk. And Sacramento has that river walk. I think it's beautiful. And it goes a long way. I like going for long runs there because it's along the river and it goes into the woods. It's just cool. And he was on that same thing, but 10 years previous. And he had said that he was just out strolling after he was at a conference, and he just went out strolling afterward. And he was abducted by white supremacists and thrown into a trunk. And they drove him to a location. He wasn't sure where it was or how long it had passed, and so many turns and things. And they tied him to a chair, like my little folding chair. They tied him to the chair, his arms and his legs to the chair, and had a sack around his head and they started punching him. And that's how he lost all his teeth. And that's how he broke his nose. And that's how his face got all scarred. And he said the sack would get soaked with blood. Oh my goodness. And he would pass out. And then he'd wake up and they'd do it again. He said, that was the pattern for us. He said, I don't even know how many times it happened. I'd wake up and that would happen and fall asleep. I don't know how long I was there. I don't know how long I was tied up. I don't know how long I was conscious or unconscious. I just knew that if I put my head up or woke, they'd hit him. And then they carved a swastika over his heart. And then he shows me his swastika. It's positioned, a big fat scar. And he said he'd pass out for a while. So he doesn't know how long he was there. And then he woke up in the trunk of the car. And he heard the trunk open. And they had a hunting knife and cut his stomach like that. And he shows me his scar. He's got a big fat scar there. And they thought they had killed him. And they threw him into a ditch. And he was found. And he said, I woke up in the hospital 2 weeks after I had gone for my walk, around 2 weeks, 12 days after I had gone for my walk. And I had to recover in the hospital. He said I was there till, almost seemed like he said like August, September, in that range. This was May, recovering. And finally he got to go home, and he said, Darryl, as soon as I hit the ground, I started drinking. And I drank and drank and drank and drank. He said I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't, my body felt like it was on fire. As everything we've talked about previously for the last 9 weeks, the vagus nerve, the midbrain, everything was hyper vigilant. He said I just was like this. And he said I drank so hard. Then he said around December, my hands started to shake. He said they were uncontrollable. I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. And then he started stuttering. Like he said, I couldn't get 2 words out. He said that's how he was talking. So he went to the ER. Then it was a small community. So I guess the ER was busy that night. They told him to go wait in the lunchroom, the cafeteria there at the clinic. So he's sitting there, and he wasn't having a heart attack or anything like that. So they said, well, we'll get to you shortly. So he's sitting in the clinic, just white knuckling it, shaking. And a physician, one of the doctors, comes into the room there to the cafeteria and says, I've heard about you, and I know about what happened to you. And I wonder if you want to try something that may make you feel better quickly. And my friends nodded like this. And so they did tapping. The EFT, the tapping part of emotional freedom techniques. Tapping is one of the techniques. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. I want to finish this part though. And the doctor helps and does the round of tapping with him. And then he was still pretty activated. So they did the second round. And the doctor says, how do you feel? How are you feeling now? And my friend said, what a quack you are. This is ridiculous. You should be ashamed of yourself for saying that this is good medicine. This is even medicine. This is ridiculous. And the doctor said, how is your stuttering? And the guy said, oh, shut up. His stutter was gone. He said, let's see your hands. And his hands weren't shaking anymore. And then he said, what did you do? What happened here? And what he did was called tapping, part of EFT, emotional freedom techniques, which are this big, long set of somatic tools that you can use to address the electrical charge, kind of collapse it or deflate it. And for me, so my friend there shows me what he did. He goes through the whole thing, showed me this tapping thing. And I was like, shut up. I mean, They didn't teach me that in school, so it must not be right. But it was just a bridge too far for me, because it was not. That's not what it wasn't what I was taught. It wasn't how I was taught, and it just was. I'm like, but I had been. That was about 4 or 5 years into me learning more about the somatic and the electrical chart. So I thought, well, maybe it has a spot in there somewhere that I'm just not understanding right now. And so the more I learned about it, there's a lot of research now out of Johns Hopkins and out of Harvard, even Bessel van der Kolk, which maybe in the fall or some point we'll do a book study on how the body keeps the score. But even he says everyone needs to learn how to do this. Peter Levine says everyone needs to learn how to do this. Gabor Mate, Robert Scare, they're all proponents of this. And those are the big cheeses in trauma work. So I thought, well, maybe I should learn this. And so I got certified in it and learned more about it. And I kind of had it in my pocket, because it's, and I hope you guys know my heart by now, that my bottom line is, if I'm going to see somebody, I want them to feel better. I pour all of myself into that because I want them to feel better. And if it means I have to have tools that maybe aren't something they have done previously, but it works, then let's do that. And really the bottom line came for me was, you can't argue with results. You can't argue with the fact that person sitting in front of you feels way better than they did when they came in. So let me kind of walk you through it a little bit. Really, it's a way of activating the prefrontal cortex, logic, language, cause and effect, rationale, and the midbrain. We wanted the midbrain to crackle a little bit. So knowing that we want to use both parts of the brain, knowing that we want to disrupt this dude right here and how it's adversely affecting us in this moment. So knowing those two things, and then knowing that our body is electrical and it bounces around just south of the speed of light. And there are certain parts in our body where we get more bang for our buck. So Gary Craig, the guy who kind of developed tapping, developed it out of what was previously known as TFT. But TFT was very clinical and very burdensome, and you had to go somewhere for this. And Gary said, well, we need something that people that are efficient and they can do it at home. They can do it in an airport. I've seen people do it at baseball games, in the dugout, pitchers. I've seen it at the airports. I've seen it be people doing it at powwows. So Gary is an engineer. So he paired up with some folks who knew about brain and electrical charge in the body, and kind of looked at, well, let's deconstruct what is going on. Because engineers like to construct and deconstruct. Let's deconstruct what is going on in the body. And they found that there are certain points in the body where you get the most bang for your buck. And it's points, Sean, that we've talked about previously, that they're either doing these things with, people do this with their hands. There's lots of points on the hands. They're doing this. Remember, we've talked about this. They're sitting like this when they're stressed, or they're doing this when they think the person that works is a doofus, or they're doing this, or when the team loses on a last second shot and they show the stands and everybody's doing this. Why do we do those things? Why do we do this? Why do we gravitate toward these areas? And so understanding that, just putting in that practical sense, we're just trying to self-regulate. We're doing it all the time. We try to self-regulate. When we're nervous, we're doing this. When we're stressed, we're doing this. When we're shocked, we do this. That's all self-regulation. And so paring that down, well, there's all these points that we're using for self-regulation already. Let's make them work for us. So they started experimenting with this and found that if you combine prefrontal with midbrain activity and tap these points, collapses. It's, all I can say is it makes people feel better fast, really. And I use it. Honestly, I've never brought it up like this to this group or the Thursday group, because I wanted to lean in first. I wanted people to understand that there's a whole different set of tools out there that we need to start accessing, that I'm rigorous about. I'm a skeptic. I consider myself a spiritual being and a man of science. I like to learn about how things are functioning. And I'm a skeptic. And so I wanted to, it's okay to be skeptical. It's not okay to be closed-minded. So I wanted to see what it was all about then. And I learned, and honestly, I use it so much in my practice to great results, So here's how it works, is the setup. Really, you just need to follow the form. It doesn't have to be verbatim what I'm saying right now. You just need to follow the form, which is the setup is a logic statement. Even though, that's a logic statement. That's a rationale. Even though this, then this. That's a logic statement. So that's a prefrontal statement. And then you describe what is happening, which would be the reptilian brain activity. Even though I'm so stressed, even though I have this pain, even though I have a compulsion to drink, smoke, hit, use, which is a physiological compulsion, even though I'm having these things, that's just how it is right now. There's your statement. You're following the form. Even though, describe the thing, and then another prefrontal. That's just how it is right now. In Gary Craig's work and Dawson Church's work, their last phrase is, but I totally and completely accept myself. Even though I'm having this anxiety attack, even though I feel out of control, I totally and utterly accept myself. Which, how many of you would say that? I mean, I don't say that. I totally and utterly accept myself. No way, man, I'm having a bad hair day. So I do not totally and utterly accept myself. And the audience I work with would never say something like that. But what they would say is, that's just how it is right now. They're okay with that. And so what you want to do in the work is kind of get them describing it. So it's like a funnel. And their description goes into the top of the funnel. You tap it down, and then whatever comes out is you put that back in. And pretty soon you're just collapsing and collapsing, collapsing and collapsing. Let me give you a couple examples. Well, let me show you the points first. So just play along with me. I can't see you guys. Every one of you has your, I just see the white head and this thing here. You know what I'm talking about. But here's the points. Is right here, it's called the karate chop point. And for whatever reason, sometimes with this stuff here, I just have to say, for whatever reason, if you started doing this while you're talking with somebody, and I'll say, let's just do our karate chop point. I'm not even make a big deal out of it. Just sit and talk like this. Our karate chop point. It's almost like, you know what, when that nut is right in that bolt and it's a little bit rusty, and you have your ratchet set and you're doing, but you start shaking it loose and then it just pops. That's kind of what this does. So if people will just start talking and they'll share something and I'll just put it right back in. I'll give it right back to them, because the less I have to make them interpret, the less I make them go all prefrontal and say, well, do I really think that? What do I mean by this? What does he mean by that? That ruins the whole thing, because we stop activating the survival centers of the brain. Now we're just all about logic and making them think too much. And that's usually when I got in my way. So the tapping is on whatever the discomfort is. For example, I'm talking with somebody and they're getting activated and they say, I just, every time I think about that, I can't stop hyperventilating like that. And I'll say, well, let's I want to know how uncomfortable it is right now. And I'll say, well, how comfortable is it right now? And they'll like a 7 or 8. Okay, we'll say it's an 8. Okay, then I'll say something like, even though, there's my prefrontal, even though I'm uncomfortable right now. I feel it in my body. I'm so stressed. That's just how it is right now. And they're repeating after me. We do it 3 times, even though I'm so stressed, my heart's beating fast. And I just really tell them what they told me. My heart's beating fast and I'm hot and I'm tingly. Even though my heart's beating fast and I'm hot and I'm tingly. That sound right? Yeah. That's just how it is right now. 2nd time, 3rd time. Even though I can feel it in my heart and I'm tingly and I'm uncomfortable. I check that with them. That's just how it is right now. And then we do the tapping points, which as I was trained on it, it's like pouring honey on top of your head. Okay, so it starts here, then it goes here, then somehow it takes a right here, then it takes a left here, and here, 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 just below the collarbone. And then here's where it gets freaky how it can travel. There's a spot right about 3 inches beneath the armpit, and there's one at the top of the ribs. So it looks like this. You can use your left hand, you can use your right hand. And the duration is pretty much the duration of the statement. It doesn't have to, let's not make brain surgery out of it. The duration is pretty much the duration of the statement. So even though I'm so stressed, blah, blah, blah. So then you pare that down just to a few words. I'm so stressed. I am so stressed. I am so stressed. I am so stressed. And you can change it up. Stress. Man, this stress. This stress. This stress. This stress. Then I have them go back to the karate chop and I have them breathe in. And then I'll say, let's do nothing for a second, because the parasympathetic doesn't pop back, it balloons back nicely, beautifully. And you can see them start to deflate. And if there's some left, if they're still, I'll say, how is it? And they'll say, oh, it's a 5 instead of an 8. Well, and we want it to be like a 1 or a 0. Let's try it again. The second time through is some remains, or there's still some left, some to that effect. So it'd be like, even though there's still some left of this stress, that's just how it is right now. Even though some remains, there's still some there. And that's just how it is right now. Even though there's still some left. That's just how it is right now. And then you tap on, remember, the symptom, not the, you don't want to say, oh, it's all sunshine and butterflies and cotton candy and rainbows. You're focusing on the stress activity. So there's still some there. There's still some there. Some remains. There's still some there. There's still some there. There's still some left. There's still some there. There's still some there. Some there. Then go back here to the karate chop and do nothing for a second. Okay. Now, a couple things, and then I'm going to give you a couple examples where I've used it as a provider. You can just Google tapping points, and they'll give you a picture. There'll be a picture of those points. There's a couple other things that when we get more in depth into it, when you guys want to start practicing it more, there's more points, but for our foundation, this is the points that we need to do to rock right now. It's just these ones, the foundation ones. Schools are using this a lot. There's more schools using it in the US, but the US is very pharmacological. So we'd rather throw pills at kids who are activated than to give them internal tools. This is much more of a common practice here. Whereas in other countries, this entire school systems do tapping. You can Google that as well. You can see how common it is in other countries. It's just that the US, we try to solve our wellness problems through chemistry instead of using our physiological tools. Yeah. So I'll give you a couple examples. I was up in, I shared this with you before, that there was a suicide outbreak up in an island in way North Canada. And they asked me if I would come up there and work with the community and kind of see what was going on and how we can develop some tools. So of course I said, yes, I'm going there. And I left home and went across the border and drove through Toronto and all the way up to Timmins. And flew out of Timmins to Moosonee, then took an ice road and a puddle jumper and a snowmobile, and ended up at a house. The community probably had maybe 150 homes. Yeah, maybe less than that. And it was 53 degrees below zero air temperature. And I don't like staying at people's houses that well. I mean, I feel like it's awkward because I don't want to see them walking around in their robe, and they don't want to see me walking around in mine. So I would go there late and leave early. So I left, that was on a Friday, and I was going to work with the community all weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And I left about 7 in the morning and went to the school where I was going to talk. In this old school. I mean, your schools, I promise, are way better. And I was sitting there, it was like 8 in the morning, 53 below zero. And this young lady walks in, about 16 years old. And she walks in. And she was all constricted like this, probably because it was 53 below zero, and she was wearing a hoodie. And she said, I heard you were here. I could barely hear her. And I said, yeah, come in. And then she came in and she had a seat right there and didn't say a word. Sat down like this and totally constricted. Remember one of the 4 horsemen, constriction. And her hoodie had kind of slid up. It was small on her and kind of slid up, and you can see there were fresh cut marks on her arm. Not vertical, not suicide, but cut marks on her arm. And they were fresh. And she was sitting there like this. And she said, and I didn't know her name. She didn't know my name. She couldn't even talk. And we sat there for like 2 minutes. Total strangers in this classroom. We sat there for 2 minutes. And I was waiting for her. I wanted to go her pace, not my pace. But it looked like she was kind of just constricting. And so I said, sometimes, after noticing the things on her arm, I said, sometimes hard things happen, huh? And she nodded and started crying. And I said, did something hard happen to you? And she started crying. And I said, can you talk about it? I didn't ask, are you willing to talk about it? Because she just walked across the town with 53 below zero in a hoodie. She was willing to come see a total stranger on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, but just couldn't. Literally, remember our buddy here, Brokaw's regions, Bernsky's region, how language is formed and comprehended. There's just no charge there right now. So she's all back here. So I'm not going to use a language tool, because why would I? It would be useless. So my language tool is off the table. And I think, what else do I have in my toolbox? And so I said, you want to try something that might make you feel better? That sound familiar? And she nodded her head yes. And so we did just a couple rounds. And she was so not verbal. So we just did this. Then we did all the points. We did all the points, kind of came back to karate chop and waited. And she was still a little constricted. And I said, let's do another one. But even though she was constricted, she became a little more verbal. And I said, how is that? She said, oh, that's a little bit better. And I said, well, let's try this. So I said, just say what I say. Even though, now we're just trying to read what she was giving me because she couldn't talk. Even though I feel awful and I hate it. That's how it is right now. That's what she was giving me. So that's and that was acceptable to her. There's no way I could have said, and I completely and utterly accept myself, totally accept myself. So I said it again, even though I feel awful and I hate it. That's how it is right now. 3 times, even though it feels awful and I hate it. That's just how it is right now. I feel awful. And she was able to repeat it. I feel so you finally can see that she's starting to collapse some stuff. At least been able to become more present. Remember we talked about the part of the brain that takes you away from this moment. So she's becoming more present and able to engage in this moment. And that's only 2 minutes, my friends. That's 2 minutes. She said, I want to tell you about it. I said, you don't have to. I said, remember, because here's the narrative. She wants to go narrative. And I'm thinking, well, let's knock this thing out. Let's take care of it. And I said, you don't have to. He said, I want to. I said, okay. I wanted her to have agency. I wanted her to have sovereignty in, here's what I choose to say to you right now, and here's what I want to. And so I gave her agency in that, sovereignty in that. And so I said, okay. And she did this. She said, and just bawling, sobbing, like that. So we had to tap it down just to get her back to where we had been. This thing was huge for her. Poor thing. I found out later she was 16 years old. This thing was huge for her. And she said, I want to tell you. And so part of tapping, one of the tapping, so here's EFT and here's tapping, and here's one of the things that come out of tapping is the movie method. I wanted to make it palatable for her. So in the movie method, you have them project the movie of this event onto like a far wall. And that serves a couple purposes. Then she's an observer of it, and it's less right here. The weight of it is less right here. So she's more of an observer of it. So I said, let's put it on the wall right there. Let's make a movie out of it. And I said, what do you want to call the movie? And she's still pretty constricted. And she said, That Thing That Happened. I said, okay. It's called That Thing That Happened. And then I told her that, you know how movies are long and they kind of have high points and low points and action and lulls. I said, let's make this part of the thing that happened, let's just make it like 2 minutes long in the movie. Let's make it short. And let's kind of start before the action starts, and then let's build into it. She said, okay. And so we were tapping on her, back to the cry chop. I said, well, go ahead and tell me. And she said, well, no, what? And then she started crying again. And so we tapped that down. And I said, you know what? How about you just look at the movie? And every time you feel something in you change, just look at me. And we'll tap that down. Remember, I have no clue what we're talking about. I even know what her name is. I have no clue what we're talking about. And I didn't need to know what we were talking about for her to feel better. So she So I said, well, go ahead and start. And I said, remember, it starts with there's a lull and then kind of work into it. In 5 seconds, just like that. And so we tap it down. And so, this is verbatim what I said. Even though right now, and she repeats after me, even though right now, in the movie, the thing that happened, I can feel it. Right now, I feel it. And that's just how it is. Even though right now, in watching the thing that happened, I can feel it in my body. And that's just how it is. I can feel it in my body, and that's just how it is. And then we tap that down. I feel it. I feel it. And then I asked her, what size is it? She said, it feels okay. And then you go back to the very beginning again. And the movie, you rewind the movie every time. And so I waited 5 seconds and I said, how is it now? She said, there's nothing there. I said, okay. She goes, 10, we make it 15 seconds in. She does this, we tap it down. Even though right now, I have no clue what this movie's about. Even though right now, I can feel it again. And I asked her, where do you feel it? She said, it's in my chest. Even though I feel it in my chest right now. That's just how it is. Even though I can feel it in my chest right now, so then tap it down. I can feel it in my chest. It's in my chest. Chest, chest. And do all the points. And then we rewind and do it again. And every time I feel like we're getting to that point, I'll say, how is it? And it's okay. Then I go, okay, keep going. How is it? And every time she looked at me with I'm not sure it's changed in me. Something somatically has changed and I'm uncomfortable. We collapse it. We collapse it. We collapse it. We collapse it. So we do this and then this and then this and then this and then this. And right about, it seemed like maybe about halfway point in the movie, she said, I can tell you now. And again, I said, I don't even know. And she said, I'll tell you. So as we're tapping, she says, my uncle went out gambling. They were drinking. He came home drunk and thought that we stole his money. This awful, awful story. And then she says, I can feel it now. I said, let's tap that down. Let's get rid of that. And so we collapsed and collapsed. And she eventually told the whole story. And at the end, I woke up in the hospital. And my uncle came in to visit me. And then we tapped that down. Then she told the whole thing again. And every time there was a spot where she had something previously, I would check on it. I'd say, is there anything there now? Is there anything, can you feel it now? Is there anything present now? And no. And then she the last time through, she said, my uncle came to visit me, but he moved away now. And she just starts laughing. And she said, I thought I'd never feel good again. She said, I thought I'd feel like that forever. Constriction, hypervigilance. I thought I'd feel like that forever. And really what she did was she collapsed the somatic. And here's the bottom line for your kids, yourself, the kids in your schools is sometimes, not everybody, I want to pathologize. Some people, some of our kids, some of our folks in our community have fired and wired this awful event with how it feels in me. The snapshots of this event, the sense, the taste, the touch of this event is fired and wired with overwhelm. What we want to do is separate those things. We're not going to make the event not occur. It occurred. It occurred when she was 12. She was now 16. She was living like that for 4 years. We're not going to make the event not occur. What we can do is we have tools for this. We have tools for the sense of overwhelm. So let's collapse this sense of overwhelm. Then the story is a thing that happened that doesn't have to define who you are or your somatic responses to the world anymore. It's just this thing that happened and it sucked. It was awful that it happened, but it's not the definition of her anymore. What's cool about that is I'm friends with the principal up there. So I get to keep track of her, keep tabs on her, and she's doing much better. I mean, if you can do it well and right and really clean things out, the results are sustainable. They can be sustained. And really what we're doing is, in the common word in tapping is collapsing. So my table here has 4 legs on it. If I take one of these legs out, it probably still has capacity to stand, some capacity to stand. But if I take another leg out, the whole thing would collapse. So we're just trying to take the legs out of the things that is holding up this sense of overwhelm. We're trying to collapse that. So as you practice this, what they always recommend, just point it at everything. Point it at stress, point it at anger, point it at hunger, point it at headaches, migraines, point it at smoking, drinking, pain. So there's a couple, there's a small book. It's about, like, literally, it's like a hand, it's really, it's just, here's the nuts and bolts of how you do it, which is Gary Craig's approach to the world. It's about this size right here, actually. This is my desk reference DSM. It's about that big right there. And it's called the Pocket Guide to EFT, or EFT for PT. EFT for PTSD. There are a couple different, well, actually, it's one version, but the guy, Gary, I always encourage people to get Gary stuff because he was the originator of it. But there's another book that has the exact same cover and everything. It's just somebody's trying to profit off of Gary's efforts. And Gary just, he's not that, he just wants everybody to have a tool to feel better. What I like about it so much is it is work oriented. Let's knock this thing out. It is portable. You can do it anywhere, and it's effective. And really, that's what else are you asking for? And so on my journey with it, I use it regularly with my patients, particularly if I'm looking at how they're self-soothing to begin with. And a lot of folks with anxiety are doing things to self-soothe to begin with. So I think, well, I kind of introduce them to us. Let's just try and see what happens. And when we get together in the future, we all get to be in a room together. I'll walk you through it, and we'll do some simple activities, simple things right there, just to show how quickly it can work with you right there in the room. And it doesn't have to be about PTSD, but it could be about even a tightness in the back of your legs. Tapping that down. It's just really, I am a big proponent of it. Maybe next time we'll do some practice rounds of it. I hope you have questions right now, because this is something totally new, totally different that we hadn't really gone over, and we went over it in an hour. And maybe you're just saying, maybe it's a bridge too far for you right now. And I say, God bless it. It can be a bridge too far for you right now. But it's funny, when I was being trained on it, they said, tap on that. Tap on the discomfort that this brings you, because it's a bridge too far for you. So point it at whatever you would like. Just experiment with it. Again, you can just Google online the form and the function. I mean, the form and the tapping points. And it's pretty simple. It's really simple. Don't make brain surgery out of it.